Good morning, each and everyone. My name is Sarisi Fernandez and my partner name is Mary Joyce Lavarian Pabungan. We are BS Hospitality Management Block 1. And for our beloved instructor, Ma'am Justin D. Caranto, good morning. Martial law. In December 1969, Marcos instructed Justice Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile and some other officials of Marcos administrations to study and know the consequences of this law and how broad the president's power was to enforce martial law because Ferdinand Marcos knew that the Communist Party of the Philippines or CPPA planned to overthrow the government, so he knew that martial law was one of the options to stop the communists. In September 1972, Marcos declared martial law, claiming that it was the last defense against the rising disorder caused by the increasingly violent student, the alien trait of communist insurgents by the new Communist Party of the Philippines, and the Muslim separatist movement of the Moro National Liberation Front. Ferdinand Marcos ordered the armed force to prevent or suppress any act of insurrections or rebellion. For the relevance and significance to Philippine history and to the Filipino nations, martial law in the Philippines was one of the most controversial and human rights violations in the Philippine history. When the Philippines President placed a territory under the jurisdictions of Philippine Armed Forces of the Philippines and precursors bodies to implement the Marcos Rule. During martial law, the Philippines GDP increasing from 8 billion to 32.5 billion dollars in around 8 years. He promoted increasingly industry and the constructions of strong infrastructures across the country, including the North Luzon Expressway and the Marilaki Highway, which up to this day, all of his project has been used.
I am Mary Joyce Lavarias Fabunan from BS Hospitality Management Block 1 Second Year. Secondary sources. Martial law through the eyes of Ferdinand Marcos. Author, Ambet R. Ocampo. Comprehensive summary. People flocked to Malacanang to confirm the reports after Ninoy Aquino revealed o Plan Sagittarius on the Senate floor in 1972. And Marcos denied any plan for martial law, but apparently Marcos or Senator Juan Ponce Enrile and other opposition planned to proclaim martial law on the same day. On September 23, 1972, Marcos says that only 52 of the plan's 200 target people have been detained, including the 3 senators Aquino, Jokino, and Mitra. 7:15 p.m., President Ferdinand Marcos issued a nationwide proclamation of martial law, as well a general commands and instruction which were aired on television and radio. This decision by President Ferdinand Marcos were the only way to fight the communists against the administration, that their goal was the overthrow the Marcos administrations and create chaos. Relevance to your chosen theme or topic. Martial law unfolds through Marcos' eyes. Diary entry written in the wee hours, September 22, 1972, he described the previous day that the public reaction throughout the Philippines is a welcome to martial law because of the smooth, peaceful re-establishment of peace in order that the hope of our reformed society. Debunk or author Rigoberto D. Tiglao. Comprehensive summary. President Marcos declared martial law in September 1972. For its sinister reputation, even that time, the party was actually a ragtag band of dreamy-eyed baby boomers who thought they could replicate the Chinese Revolution. The booming was blamed on Marcos, who had become unpopular because of the massive student demonstrations against his administration and the opposition, unrelenting macracking against him through their powerful media opposition. Marcos imposed martial law in 1972, after a year of meticulous preparation during which he convinced the military establishment and his closest allies in the ruling class that was the only way to save the republic from the left and the right. Marcos suppressed only a small of it that was allowed enemy years before. Relevance to our chosen topic or theme. Martial law is a span of a lifetime, and with regard to the Marcos era, we are seeing the truth of the quote attributed to the Bavarian playwright Ernest Toller, or the history of the propaganda victors. Also, Ferdinand Marcos, or the martial law history, is the propaganda of the victors' Chinese Communist Party rule through the so-called democracy movement that peaked in the Tiananmen protests also in 1989. And lastly, the press under martial law. Author Dogan Osguden. Comprehensive summary. Martial law commanders coming directly under the military junta with the proclamation law, all executive and judicial powers were handed. Hundreds of intellectuals were tried in the newly instituted military courts, and of the sometimes the change concerned offenses committed 3 or 4 years earlier. At the first, the military authorities prohibited every type of publication, film, or theater performance, discrediting the government or aiming at the overthrow of the basic institution or inciting to rebellion. The relevance of our chosen topic or our chosen theme. Martial law was introduced. A progressive or social periodical were closed down. Hundreds of thousands of books confiscated. The daily newspaper were completed to change their policies. The radio television network was placed under the control of Army General. In fact, the freedom of the press, opinion, and the arts had already been violated during the previous 6 years under the rule of the Justice Party, which had engaged in manhunts and various other forms of repression. But with the imposition of martial law on April 26, 1971, all executive and judicial power was placed in the hands of the generals by amendment to Article 22 empowers the executive to limit the freedom of the press and information gathering for the protection of the territorial and national unity of the state.
Now, for primary and secondary analysis, based from choosing primary and secondary source, recreate how it is to live as a person or students in times of your chosen theme or topic. Living in the area of martial law dictated by the late President Ferdinand E. Marcos has its positive and negative traits together. There are positive traits that would be greatly benefit my well-being and the people as a whole. If we live in that era, to put it simple in terms, we all know that the states of the Philippines is a crime-prone state. In the martial law, crime rates were very low, and the unregistered weaponry was very rare. Although the flow of society was managed truly by military force, it was safer and more organized. There would be less time for us to go out idly with thinking of the curfew. However, living in that era would be the best way to be more respectable and at the same time become organized persons. But in spite of the good it has brought, there are also bad incidents that can be said to be inhuman.
second question is the primary and source and secondary analysis. The question is, what did you learn and realize for this assessment? So our answer is, what my partner and I learned on this assessment about martial law is that this history is one of the most controversial histories that happened during Marcos era. It contains important information. What Marcos did is not unconstitutional. He did it to fight the people who wanted to rule the Philippines. In fact, Marcos have done many projects that provides employment and highways that to this day still benefit people. But he was still accused of being a thief and a dictator, but the truth is he was the best president in the Philippines.